They called it Zarin the Death Beast. For centuries it sat in a reinforced cage within the Galactic Council's archives, a relic of war long past but still feared. It was said to have torn apart entire battalions of elite alien soldiers in its prime. No one dared approach until now. The Galactic Council archives were a graveyard of forgotten nightmares, artifacts of unimaginable power, tools that had ended civilizations, and in the very heart of the archives, a beast of war that refused to die. It sat motionless in its cage, an ancient creature of claw, scale, and malice. It wasn't dead, it couldn't die, at least that's what the rumors said. A creature engineered by a now extinct alien empire for one purpose: to kill. It had earned countless titles over Ian the Death Beast, the bane of armies, the eternal hound. Its existence had become myth to some, but to those in the archives it was a silent, terrifying reality, a warning of what happens when life becomes a weapon. No one dared to go near it, let alone interact with it. The cage was reinforced with energy barriers capable of stopping supernova shock waves, a testament to the Council's terror. Hundreds of species had once tried to tame the beast, only to fail. It killed anything that approached, and now a human had arrived. Let me get this straight, Great sneered High Curator Vnar. A pale-skinned Zarthan with 6 glimmering eyes, he towered over the small, rugged figure in front of him. You, a mere human, wished to enter the containment chamber of Zakin the Death Beast. The human smirked. His name was Lieutenant Daniel Harris, though Vnar couldn't care less. Humans were unpredictable creatures, stubborn, reckless, and somehow still alive despite a galactic history full of poor odds. Yep, Harris said casually, adjusting the worn strap of his backpack. Heard you've got a misunderstood PPP in there. Figured someone ought to say hello. The chamber went silent. A dozen alien clerks froze, their eyes widening as they turned toward the human. Some whispered in hushed, horrified tones. Others stared like they were witnessing someone walk into a black hole. You think this creature is a pet? Vnar kissed his 6 eyes, narrowing, going into daggers. Zarin has slaughtered billions. Empires were devoured by its rage. What delusion makes you believe you'll be safe? Harris just shrugged, a lopsided grin spreading across his face. Sounds like he just hasn't met the right person yet. Villar's rage faltered for a brief moment. Confusion spread across his alien features. Was this human joking? I'll sign whatever waiver you've got, Harris said, suddenly serious. This beast, it's not a tool, not a machine. It's alive. Someone has to treat it like it matters. Vnar waved a trembling hand toward the containment doors. Fine, human, die quickly. I refuse to clean up the mess you leave behind. The guards activated the massive doors, groaning mechanisms grinding open. As energy shields shimmered away, a blast of hot air rolled into the hall. An unnatural heat that stank of ancient forgotten things. A wave of dread filled the room as Harris stepped forward into the darkness. The doors slammed shut behind him. Inside the cage, the chamber holding Zarin was enormous, a cavern of metal walls stretching into darkness, illuminated only by faint flickering lights. The air was dense, thick with a smell Harris couldn't quite place, and there it was, the death beast. Zarin lay curled in the center of the chamber, its body massive and coiled like a slumbering nightmare, scales black as void stretched over its muscular form, glowing faintly with streaks of molten red. Its claws dug into the ground like swords driven into stone. Its breathing echoed through the room, a low rumbling sound that made Harris's chest vibrate. Harris whistled low. You're a big fella, aren't you? The beast stirred a ripple of Movement passed over its scales as its head slowly rose. Its face was angular and terrifying, a fusion of predator and nightmare, for crimson eyes opened, each one locking onto Harris with an intensity that could freeze a sun. Harris stopped walking. He stood tall, keeping his posture relaxed despite the primal terror scraping at his instincts. Zarin loomed larger and larger as it uniled its body, each step forward making the ground quake beneath its weight, and then it growled, a low thunderous rumble took the chamber. Harris swore. He saw the walls tremble. This wasn't just a warning growl, it was the kind of sound an apex predator makes just before it pounces. Harris didn't flinch. Hey, big guy, he said calmly, his voice cutting through the rumble. I'm not here to fight you. The beast froze. It tilted its monstrous head as though curious. Harris reached into his backpack slowly, never breaking eye contact. I brought you something. Thought you might be hungry. From his pack he pulled out a piece of meat, thick, marbled, and cooked just enough to release its rich scent. Carefully, he placed it on the ground and stepped back. Zarin's eyes narrowed, its massive nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. For a moment, Harris wasn't sure what would happen. Then, in a slow, deliberate movement, Zarin staled forward. Its claws clicked against the metal floor like distant thunder. It sniffed the meat. A low guttural noise escaped its throat, not a growl this time, but something softer. Its jaws opened, revealing rows of fangs sharp enough to shear through steel. Harris held his breath. The beast devoured the meat in a single motion, and then it looked at him again. Good boy, Harris murmured softly, his lips curling into a smile. See, I'm not so bad. Zarin let out a deep exhale, hot and heavy like an industrial furnace. For the first time, its eyes no longer glowed with malice. It was still terrifying, still massive and dangerous. But there was something new in its gaze, recognition, trust. Harris sat down on the ground, legs crossed, arms resting on his knees. He stayed still, patient, as the beast observed him. No one else in the galaxy would dare to do this, but he wasn't like the others. You're not a monster, Paris said, quietly, speaking to the void around them. You've just been alone too long, haven't you? Zarin tilted its head again, an almost childlike gesture from a creature of such nightmarish proportions. A silence fell over the chamberman and beast sat together, two unlikely souls sharing a fragile moment of peace. Outside, the Galactic Council clerks waited nervously by the doors, expecting screams. Instead, all they heard was the faint sound of silence, and then soft laughter. The doors to Zarin's chamber hissed open, and every alien in the hall braced for the worst. Harris stepped out calmly, his uniform dusty but intact. The clerk stared in disbelief. Villar dropped the data pad he was holding. Zarin stood behind Harris, just inside the chamber. Its monstrous head tilted slightly as it watched him leave. It didn't kill you, Vnar stammered. It didn't rip you apart. Harris grinned and tossed his backpack over his shoulder. Nah, he's not so bad. The hall went silent again as every alien watched Zarin retreat back into the chamber, its glowing eyes lingering on Harris before the massive doors slid shut. Vnar turned to the human, speechless. What did you do? Harris winked. Made a friend. The Galactic Council had dealt with planetary wars, extinction-level events, and cosmic threats beyond imagination. But the news that Zack and the Death Beast had befriended a human threw them into full-blown panic. For creatures who ruled through order and fear, this was chaos incarnate. The council chamber was a sight to behold, a vast crescent-shaped Arena filled with leaders from hundreds of alien species, holographic banners of their respective empires hovered in the air. Glowing faintly at the center stood High Curator Vnar, sweat dripping from his pale, ashing face as he addressed the assembled leaders. The murmurs and whispers had already escalated to arguments before he even began speaking. Council members, Vnar began his voice cracking. We are faced with an unprecedented crisis. Zarin the Death Beast, the creature we imprisoned for millennia, has not only spared a human, but appears to have bonded with him. The uproar that followed was deafening. A three-eyed Macan slammed a fist on the table. This is a catastrophe. That beast is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy, and now it listens to a human shed a feathery Altari diplomat, her voice rising to an unearthly pitch. Humans are reckless, unstable. If this bond continues, they could unleash it on us. Madness, roared a Tus, Varric warlord. The creature obeys no one. That human has merely delayed its slaughter. Vnar raised a trembling hand. Silence all of you. The crowd quieted, if only slightly. This development must be understood and contained immediately. Vnar continued, we must bring the human Daniel Harris before this council to explain himself. If this bond poses a threat to galactic security, we must act. The murmurs resumed, but there was no disagreement. The ancient death beast, a weapon capable of decimating entire fleets, was now a wild card under the influence of an unpredictable species. Humans, despite their small numbers and short lives, had a history of rewriting galactic expectations, and they were dangerous. The summons. Daniel Harris had barely returned to his ship when the summons came through a direct holographic projection from the council. He was lounging in the cargo hold tinkering with some wiring when a shimmering figure of Vnar appeared before him. Human, Vnar said with the tone of someone chewing on something sour, you are ordered to appear before the Galactic Council immediately. Your interaction with Zakin has caused an uproar. Harris didn't even look up from his tools. Good to see you too, Vnar. This is not a request, Vnar snapped. You will explain yourself. The council demands answers. Harris sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. What's to explain? Big scary lizard isn't as scary. Once you get to know him, you will come, Vnar barked, or we will come for you. Harris rolled his eyes. Fine, send me the coordinates. I'll bring snacks. Villar's hologram flickered out in frustration. The council chamber. When Harris arrived at the council chamber, the reaction was exactly what he expected. Gasps of disbelief echoed through the arena as the lone human strode confidently to the center. He wore his usual scuffed boots, utility vest, and a cocky grin that seemed to irritate every alien present. There were no guards. Harris hadn't needed any. The council chamber was equipped with energy disruptors and containment fields designed to incapacitate anything and everything. The alien delegates didn't fear him, they feared what he represented. Vnar stood at the forefront, glaring daggers at Harris as the human took his place. Daniel Harris, Vnar began, you are here to answer for your reckless behavior. You entered the containment chamber of the Death Beast and somehow returned unharmed. Yep, Harris replied casually. The feathery Altari delegate flapped her wings angrily. And now the creature trusts you? How? Harris shrugged. I was nice to him. A ripple of disbelief swept through the crowd. You were nice? Bold, the tusked Varric warlord. That's it. Harris crossed his arms. You ever consider that maybe treating something like a monster makes it act like one? Zarin isn't a mindless weapon. He's alive. He's smart, and he's been stuck in that cage for longer than your empires have existed. You're lucky he hasn't turned all of you into space dust. The crowd erupted into furious arguments, voices overlapping as accusations and panic filled the air. Vienne's voice boomed over them all. Enough. He pointed a clawed finger at Harris. If you are lying, human, you endanger us all. We cannot allow the Death Beast to remain unchecked. It must be destroyed. The room fell silent. Harris's smile disappeared. His voice was low and dangerous when he spoke. You what? Vnar sneered. You heard me. The creature must be eliminated before it poses a threat to galactic stability. It's a relic of war that should never have existed. Harris's jaw tightened and a spark of anger flickered in his eyes. You don't get it, do you? Zarin isn't the threat. You are. The council chamber exploded with noise again. Accusations. Flying species shouting over one another. Harris stood his ground, fists clenched at his sides as Vnar loomed over him, if you will not help us contain the beast. Vnar said coldly, then we will handle it ourselves, and you human will bear the consequences. Before Harris could reply, an emergency siren blared through the council chamber. Red lights flashed. A holographic display appeared above the room showing the sealed containment chamber, where Zarin had been kept. The massive reinforced doors were open. Zarin was gone. Chaos erupted as council members screamed and fled their seats. The Vnar froze in place, his 6 eyes wide with terror. Harris's lips curled into a small, knowing smile while he muttered, I guess someone let the big guy out for a walk. Vilmer turned him pale and trembling. What have you done, human? Harris shrugged. Me, nothing. You're the ones who wanted to pick a fight. And somewhere in the depths of space, a low, rumbling growl echoed across the void. Zarin the Death Beast was free. The council chamber, once a hub of composed authority, now stood as a battleground of fear. Screens flashed warnings across the arena as the chaos intensified. Containment breach confirmed. Zarin has escaped. Threat level extinction. Daniel Harris didn't flinch, but the council did. Villar's trembling claws clutched the edge of the council podium as the emergency sirens wailed on. Alien delegates were bolting for exits, trampling each other in their frenzy. Some cried out to secure ships, others demanded an immediate military response, but all of them wore the same expression. Abject terror locked down the system. Vnar barked at his assistants, seal every gate. Deploy hunter fleets, nothing gets in, or out. On the center floor, Harris slipped entirely out of place, hands shoved into his vest pockets, quietly watching the meltdown. He knew exactly what was coming next, and he wasn't looking forward to it. The Varric warlord shoved his way to Villar's platform, tusk quivering with fury. This is your fault, he roared at Harris. You've unleashed the beast on all of us. Wrong, Harris replied calmly, turning toward the warlord. You caged him. I just treated him like he wasn't your dirty little secret. Maybe, he decided, he's done taking orders. The accusation hit like a laser blast. The warlord lunged, but a force field kept him back. Instead, he snarled in place. Vnar's voice, sharp with desperation, filled the room. Silence, we cannot waste time blaming this human. Deploy every available fleet to hunt the death beast. Daniel snorted. Hunt him. Good luck with that. The words, casual as they were, seemed to knock the entire room into stunned silence. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to him in unison. Vnar kissed, stepping down toward Harris, his towering figure looming like a shadow over the human. And why exactly would that be a problem? Harris met his glare without blinking. Because if you come after him, he'll come after you, and trust me, he won't stop. A holographic projection blinked on behind them, interrupting the moment. It was the live feed from the containment planet, now a wreckage of buoying craters and broken metal ships that had been stationed near the Death Beast prison lay in pieces, drifting in space like toys discarded by an angry child. Reports coming in. A frantic assistant shouted. Zarin's heading for the Zork sector. He's moving faster than expected. Multiple planetary systems are evacuating the council chamber. Fell deathly quiet. Fools, Harris muttered under his breath. Vnar whipped toward him, eyes flaring. Explain yourself, human. What do you know of this creature's intentions? Harris sighed, running a hand through his hair. You really don't get it, do you? Locked him up, made him a monster in everyone's eyes, and now you're treating him like a problem you can solve with fleets and bombs. But Zarkin doesn't think like you. He's not hunting territory or power, he's hunting for justice. Justice, the Altari delegate's voice quivered with disbelief. Yeah, Harris said, leveling his gaze at the council. You made him suffer alone for thousands of years. You caged him and used him as a warning. Now he's free, and he's going to settle the score. Zarin's true power. The council scrambled to deploy their fleets, launching ships across star systems in a desperate attempt to corner the creature. The Zork sector, a system of sparsely populated planets, became ground zero for the galaxy's most ambitious manhunt. Harris, of course, wasn't invited to the control center, but he watched the mess unfold from a balcony above the council war room. Holographic maps covered the walls, displaying the countless squadrons spreading through space like a net. Vnar and his command team coordinated the operation. Sector 7, move your cruisers into a blockade pattern. Sector 8, report any anomaly. We must box it in. But Daniel couldn't hold back his frustration. You're idiots, he muttered. Villar's voice snapped like a whip. You have something useful to add, human? Harris shrugged, leaning on the railing. You're not chasing a fugitive, you're trying to box in a storm. Do you know how powerful Zarin actually is? The council didn't respond. Vilner glared at him. Skeptical, but listening. Your fleets don't stand a chance, Harris continued. You've only ever seen Zarin contained. What do you think happens when something that powerful has no more chains holding it back? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The answer came moments later. A fleet in Sector 7 blinked off the holographic map. No warning, no signals, just gone. Sector 7. Respond, Vnar barked, panic creeping into his voice. Where's your transmission? Static. An emergency feed from the fleet's lead ship finally appeared, crackling with distorted visuals. The image was pure chaos, fire, smoke, and flashing alarms. And then, in the background, Zarin emerged, the massive creature larger than any dread. Not in the fleet tore through warships as if they were made of paper. Its scales rippled with energy, absorbing and deflecting everything thrown at it. Laser cannons did nothing. Explosives detonated Ed harmlessly against its hide, and then the feed cut out. The war room was silent. Every alien frozen in shock. Harris muttered under his breath, almost like a whisper. You never had a chance. A risky plan. Vnar spun to face Harris, his expression a mix of rage and desperation. You knew it was this powerful. Of course I did, Harris replied flatly. I've spent time with him, got a sense of what he really is. Villar's hands clenched. Then you will fix this. You bonded with the death beast, you tamed it. If you don't help us stop it, billions will die. The entire council chamber turned toward Harris, silent, waiting for the first time. Daniel's smirk faded. He looked out across the war room at the holographic carnage displayed on the screen's aisle. Talk to him, Harris said. Finally, you, the Altari delegate, squawked. What makes you think you can stop this? Harris shrugged. Because Zarin isn't a monster. He's angry, and maybe the galaxy needs to hear him out. Vnar stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. And if he refuses to listen, Harris turned his expression hard. Then you'd better hope he only wants revenge on the council, and not the whole damn galaxy. The council chamber was quiet as Daniel walked out, heading toward his ship. He could feel the weight of 100 alien eyes watching him go. In the war room, Vnar turned to his assistants. Prepare the containment fleet, he said grimly. If the human fails, we'll destroy the death beast, even if it costs us everything. As Daniel reached his ship, he looked up at the stars where Zarin waited. Let's hope you're still listening, big guy, he muttered, because if he wasn't, the galaxy would burn. The vastness of space stretched before Daniel. Harris, like an ocean of darkness, alone in his small, reinforced human vessel. He sailed directly into the eye of the storm. The council's fleets were scattered, their warships broken, their spirits shattered. But Daniel wasn't here to fight. He was here to face the monster. They all feared. The star system, known as Zorak Prime, had become a graveyard. Debris drifted across its orbit. Hulk of council battleships, twisted and charred from the onslaught. Fire still burned in the void, flaring up in bursts of oxygen that leaked from shattered holes. The once proud fleets of a dozen species had been reduced to nothing but space litter. In the center of it all, Zarin drifted like a living nightmare. Daniel's ship shuddered as he approached. His sensors blared warnings, warning him of radiation spikes, gravitational anomalies, and energy levels that shouldn't have been possible. Zarin was more than alive. He was radiating power, raw and primal, like a sun barely contained. All right, big guy, Daniel muttered under his breath, gripping the controls. It's me, don't sweat me like a bug. Zarin turned the beast's sheer scale made Daniel's stomach lurch. Its body dwarfed anything humanity had ever built, a monstrous tapestry of living armor shimmering with energy, its eyes glowing like molten stars focused on the tiny ship approaching it. For a moment, Daniel wasn't sure he could do this. What if Zarin no longer cared about reason? What if the warg's mind had been consumed by rage, driven past the point of no return? But he forced himself to breathe. Zarin, he said, activating the ship's communicator. His voice crackled through the void. It's me, Daniel. Do you remember me? There was no reply, just silence. And then the deep rumble began. It wasn't sound. There was no air to carry it, but through his ship sensors, Daniel could feel the vibrations, the pulse of something ancient and angry. Zarin's voice came through like an avalanche, deep and low, vibrating Daniel's bones. Human, you came. Daniel exhaled, relief mixing with the fear. still gripping his chest. Yeah, I came. You didn't make it easy to find you. The beast moved closer, its immense form shadowing the human ship. Daniel could see the scars still etched into Zaren's armor, the marks of millennia spent imprisoned, experimented on, tortured by species that feared his power. The council had chained him and then buried him under a mountain of lies, but here he was free and angry. Why are you here? Zaren's voice thundered. I gave them mercy once they caged me for it. Daniel leaned forward in his pilot's chair, speaking softly, but with purpose. I'm not here for the council. I don't care about their wars, their fleets, or their lies. I'm here for you. Zaren stilled. Daniel continued, his voice steady. You don't owe them mercy, Zaren, but this. He gestured to the chaos beyond the viewport, the wreckage still drifting. This isn't justice, this is revenge, and it'll destroy everything, including you. The beast growled, a sound that made Daniel's ship rattle. They deserve destruction. They made me a monster. You're not a monster, Daniel said firmly. Not to me. You're more than what they did to you. You're better than them. For the first time, Zaren hesitated. The glow in his molten eyes dimmed slightly, like a flicker of doubt had entered his mind. Daniel pushed forward, his voice rising. You don't want to burn the galaxy down. You don't want their wars. You want to be free, right? Truly free, not hunted, not feared, not caged again. You want peace, but you'll never find that peace if you let their hatred consume you. Zaren stared at the human, his massive form looming in the darkness. The stars around them seemed to bend, warping under his gravitational presence. Daniel's knuckles turned white on the controls. The wrong word, one wrong word, and Zarkin could end him in an instant. I'm asking you to trust me, Daniel said quietly, the way I trusted you. Silence. Seconds stretched into an eternity, and then Zaren spoke. Trust. His voice was softer now, like distant thunder. They may trust a weapon, yet you are different. Daniel swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. I am different. Humans are different. That's why I came, not to stop you, just to talk, because you're my friend. Zaren. The molten glow of Zaren's eyes softened further. The massive creature, the warg that had decimated entire fleets, turned its head slightly, as if considering Daniel's words. Friend. The moment hung fragile as glass. The council's final mistake. Akake. From across the system, the council fleet watched the confrontation unfold. Vnar, sitting in his command chair, glared at the feed from their distant spy drones. Is he reasoning with the creature? The Altari delegate asked in disbelief. Vnar sneered. It doesn't matter. We can't risk failure. Prepare the annihilation cannons, but the human is expendable. Vnar roared. If Zaren lives, we die. The fleet's massive cannons hummed to life, energy building for one final devastating strike. The command was given, but Zaren heard it, a titan's wrath. Zaren's head snapped upward, the molten glow of his eyes flared back to life, brighter than ever. Daniel's ship shook as the creature let out a deep, shattering growl that echoed across space. They never learned. Zaren, wait, Daniel shouted, but it was too late. The beast turned toward the fleet, moving faster than Daniel thought possible. The warships fired, releasing beams of blinding energy that tore through the void, but Zaren was ready. He absorbed the onslaught, his scales glowing brighter, feeding off their power. Then, with a roar that sent shockwaves through the system, he unleashed it back at them. Thiel's flagship shattered into fragments. Warships exploded, one after another, consumed by the wrath they had provoked. From his cockpit, Daniel watched in horror as Zaren tore through the fleet like a hurricane. Villar's fleet had chosen war, and they had been annihilated. The final plea, when the silence returned. The system was empty. Nothing remained of the fleet but dust and debris. Daniel's ship drifted closer to Zaren. The creature, his massive form glowing faintly, turned his gaze back to the human. They forced my hand, Daniel noted slowly, his voice quiet. Yeah, they did, but now it's over. It's time to leave it behind. Zaren, start over. Be more than their fear for a long time. Zaren said nothing. Finally, the beast turned, his massive form moving away into the void. I will go, but know this, human, if they hunt me again, there will be no mercy. And with that, Zaren disappeared into the darkness, leaving Daniel alone among the stars. Hours later, back at the council chambers, Daniel Harris stood before the surviving delegates. You did this, he said coldly. You pushed him too far. Zaren's gone now, but if you come after him again, you won't survive. What comes next? Vnar stared at the human, seething with rage, but saying nothing as Daniel turned to leave. His voice echoed to the chamber. Maybe next time you'll listen when a human says stand down, the doors closed behind him.